prestigious Australian Centre for Field Robotics. I think that's a pretty well-known name. One of the biggest income generators, like funding, attracts a lot of funding from industrial clients. So I was born, bred at ACFR, and I absorbed all the philosophy, worked with some of the greatest scientists in field robotics. I left ACFR to start off this company in 2014, and I was aided by Masood over here from the Department of Photonics, and Ibrahim, who was from the Department of Geotechnical Engineering, and I was lucky enough to have my wife on board as a co-founder as well. We started off with $1,000 each. We were broke academics. I was a postdoc researcher, Masood was a postdoc researcher, Ibrahim was doing a PhD, and we basically, sorry about that, we were broke postdoc researchers and PhD students, and I just got back from an ocean exploration expedition in the Atlantic and the Caribbean with Bob Bellard, the guy who founded Nautilus, and I was just like, wow, future of robotics, underwater. 90% of the oceans are unexplored. There's so many problems that we can solve over there. And I see sensors as a future of it. And a robot is just a mobile sensor. So I approached this guy and I said, let's do it, man. And he said, okay, I'll think about it. And then he's like, let's do it. And we jumped into it. And we got Ibrahim because we're like, okay, now we've got some cool tech, but we got to find clients. So Ibrahim jumped on board because we said, let's take these robots and look at infrastructure. And that's how we started. Spent about a year running around chasing fake clients because we wanted to start smaller and more local. We spent some time in the strata industry. Met that great gentleman over there from Incubate, Mike Nichols, who lured us out into that and said, "This is what you guys should be doing." He taught us the basics of business at the Incubate program, and that's how we kicked off. But before that, Marianne Large. She was the inspiration that got us started. I was still a researcher before I jumped into any commercialization, and she was talking about all this IP and commercialization and innovation, and I said, okay, let's do it. Then a month later, I was on it, and we registered a company, and we were at it. And she was critical in luring us towards Incubate, and Incubate was critical in converting us into an actual company and not just being academics that are running around with great algorithms and love their papers. There's a lot to business beyond a cool idea, and it's 95% about your execution. And that's the thing we started learning the hard way. So we got Sydney Water as a client, 2014, and 2015 we started. 2014 is when we registered. 2015 is when we got our first client. And 2016 we spent a lot of time in the water sector. 2017 we branched out into the UAE, the US, still in the water sector, and by the end of it we jumped into the shipping sector. Most recently we hit the road in Houston and the UAE in the offshore oil and gas sector, and it's one of the great industries, like the military, that fund innovations. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things about it, but they fund a lot of innovations because the risk factor over there is a lot, and I'll talk a bit about my company in a bit. But we got from 4 founders who were completely broke to a company of 20 people operating in the US, UK, the UAE, multiple geographies. It's mind-boggling. I'm trying to catch up with it, and there's just so much stuff to do, and you just got to run with it. It's like a forest, it's got a clear path. There's snipers on both sides, and you just got to run through it. You can't stop. So if you stop, you're going to get shot, and you're going to be a sitting duck. You can't stop. You have to make decisions like this, and you have to move on. And you just got to go with the flow. So you can't think too much about some of the decisions that you make. So what do? Let's get to the real part. We look at critical underwater infrastructure. So we use robots and some really high-end imaging systems to do condition assessments or conduct structural health monitoring. There's a lot of critical infrastructure out there, all in the water sector. Aging dams, aging oil and gas infrastructure causes a lot of leaks, oil spills, so on and so forth, and aging ships. So all of the critical infrastructure really needs to be managed and looked at properly. You can't do that if you don't have good data. That's what Abyss Solutions provides. We go out there, we collect the data, and we make the assessments, and we give you all that information. So you can make much better decisions as to when to decommission, when to replace a part, so on and so forth. One of the examples of that is one of our clients, BAE Systems. You see those two big ships in Garden Island? So we're providing data for that. So that's just an example of the kind of critical infrastructure that we look at. When it comes to optimized asset management, there's a lot of problems that people currently face, particularly underwater. You get these videos of your asset. They're very localized in their footprint. There's not a lot you can draw about it. The color systems the color of the images is not calibrated properly. You don't know if you're looking at corrosion, or is that distortion caused by the water quality, so on and so forth. Your views are really restricted. You don't get kilometer scale views. You don't get large views. You can't look at an asset in its entirety. It's very hard to interact with it. So Abyss Solutions comes together and solves these problems. So a bit about our pipeline. How do we do that? So first, isn't that part supposed to play? So the first one's an animation of a robot going around. So basically, we use high-end imaging systems to collect some of the best data that's out there underwater. We've got in-house engineers that develop these systems and the algorithms that go on them. They optimize the capture of light and minimize the amount of backscatter in the images. Then they amplify the background and segregate and remove and filter the foreground. That really helps in bringing out a nice clear image. Without good clear images underwater, it's very hard to make any decisions. Then we've got these robots that can go around and systematically scan an area. So for example, if you want a full 3D model of a pump, we'll systematically scan it. So that's where the autonomy of our robots comes in. Here's where the cool part starts, is when you get the data, then we can run these algorithms on terabytes of data. And just in a matter of hours, we can figure out, with 90% accuracy, depending on the problem, a list of all the cracks, corrosion, and everything. So we can mine tons and tons of data, which means we can enable frequent, periodic monitoring of your assets. And finally, we stitch all our images together and take all that data and put it together into a 3D model. So that's an example on a live asset that our model is, on an actual asset that our robots are scanning and building a 3D model. And you can then start interacting with that 3D model. You can make measurements. And really, this is where engineers get really interested, because then you can measure changes in the infrastructure, which is the holy grail of asset management. And really, that's where it is. I mean, that's about it. And we are growing and looking for more and more talented people. Almost all our technical people are Sydney Uni graduates. We keep coming back here to hire people. We just stopped doing advertisements on Seek. It just doesn't work. We go to our networks, so we're always on the lookout for talented machine learning engineers, talented people in optics and imaging, and talented people in talented software developers. That's definitely critical for our thing. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's it.